Hello everybody, my name is Dr. Michelle Ronksley-Pavia and welcome to the second webinar in the 2025 Griffith University Gifted Education Symposium series. We'll soon be hearing from Professor Julia Link-Roberts on Expect to Differentiate. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Yugambeh and Kombumerri peoples as the traditional custodians of the lands from which I'm speaking to you today, and recognise their continuing connection to the country, land and waters, and thank them for protecting this coastline, hinterland and its ecosystem since time immemorial. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Nations people present today. Please join me in acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and country from where you're joining us by posting in the chat. Also, let us know from where in the world you're joining us today. I'd like to acknowledge and thank my organising team as well behind this year's symposium series, Mrs. Anna Fowler, who will be assisting with facilitating the Q&A session and reading your questions for Professor Roberts, and Ms. Mary Ellen Feldhagen, who is our wonderful admin assistant. Please join me in thanking the organising team. Our overview for today is the introduction and welcome, probably a little less than 10 minutes, done our acknowledgement of country, and then I'll introduce our second webinar with Professor Julia Link-Roberts on Expect to Differentiate. We'll then have about 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A following Professor Roberts' presentation, and then we'll finish around about 10:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. So as we're almost ready to introduce our presenter, I'd just like to provide an overview of the next three up-and-coming webinars in the 2025 Gifted Education Symposium series. So next Thursday, the 23rd of October, 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m, we have Dr. Eleanor Van Gerven, who will be presenting Alone You Go Faster and Together You Can Accomplish More, the Search for Golden Moments. The following session will be on Thursday, the 6th of November, 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. with Professor Del Sigli, who will be speaking about increasing motivation for gifted students. And then our final session will be myself and Mrs. Catherine Clark, and we'll be presenting some of our recent research, pressing issues in Australian gifted education from multi-stakeholder perspectives. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Professor Julia Link-Roberts, who is the Mahurin Endowed Professor of Gifted Studies, where she is the Executive Director of the Centre for Gifted Studies and the Gatton Academy of Mathematics and Science in Kentucky. She is Chair of the Kentucky Advisory Council for Gifted Education and on the boards of the Association for the Gifted and the Kentucky Association for Gifted Education. She is the past President of the World Council for Gifted and Talented Children. Julie's session is titled Expect to Differentiate. Differentiation is not really difficult if you see it as necessary for learning to occur and not an add-on to your planning. This session will focus on the key steps in differentiating that start with planning and conclude with reflecting. Differentiation must be defensible, and one step to make differentiation defensible is to follow planning with pre-assessment, and then using what is learned to tier learning experiences. Content, process and product can be tiered to address levels of readiness and interest of students. Examples of pre-assessment, tiered learning experience and a rubric for products will be shared. Please join me in welcoming Professor Julia Link-Roberts. Thank you.
Here we go. I am delighted to be with you, and good morning to you. I laugh when I say good morning because it's not morning here at all. We are, it's evening, about 6 o'clock in the evening, and I'm so happy to see the array of speakers that you have the opportunity to hear and to participate in their presentations. And of course, I'm honored to be one of them. So my title, Expect to Differentiate, is one that I've actually been talking about this morning. We are looking in many states in the United States at more advanced content being offered across the board. And so we've had superintendents of school districts in to talk about that yesterday and today. So our teachers pretty much expect to differentiate, but not necessarily for our brighter students. They expect to differentiate for young people who may need more basic instruction and more time. But what I'm here to talk about is how do we differentiate for those who need more complex instruction and maybe less time to learn it. So expectations have a great deal to do with how we thrive in school. So the goals of differentiation, to me, are to ensure continuous progress, which means students are learning both content and skills every day they're in school, and to create lifelong learners. I think both of those are incredibly important. Do you agree with those goals for differentiation? And if we were in a workshop session, I'd say, how do you agree with them? What parts do you agree with? But all of us need to have goals for differentiation. And if by any chance you want to use the ones I've suggested, that'd be great. Do you agree that every child goes to school to learn new content and skills? If so, we agree on that. But I do want to ask you a question. Who is left out when there is a one-size-fits-all approach to offering learning opportunities to our students? And I have a background in what happens in the United States, and it could be entirely different for you. But I hope that the one-size-fits-all classroom isn't what you experience. We do sometimes, and sometimes not. And this might be the most important thing I say tonight. If teachers don't expect to differentiate for high-ability learners, doing so will be a burden. We must expect to differentiate so all of the children in the classroom are learning. I'm going to repeat this because it really is what my whole talk is about. If teachers don't expect to differentiate for high-ability learners, doing so will be a burden, and we avoid burdens. So let's make sure that we expect to differentiate for high-ability students as well as for students who need more time and less complexity. Sandy Kaplan's well-known gifted educator in the United States. And here's a comment that I think is worthy of sharing. When teachers differentiate for gifted learners, it spills over to elevate instruction for every student. I like this spillover idea that's there. So many times people don't see gifted children as being needy. Well, the problem is that needs for children with gifts and talents are created by their strengths. And consequently, they may not look needy to parents or to educators, but the needs are real. And it is those real needs that necessitate us to pay attention to the needs. And it is those strengths that make it so important for us to differentiate for high ability students. And I would have to tell you, this is an idea that I don't think lots of people think about. But when they hear about gifted students' needs being created by the strengths, they resonate to it because it does explain a whole lot. And yet we've got to educate others as to what the needs of these children are and young people so that they pay attention to it. It's only when you recognize a need that you would feel it's important to accommodate that need. So with all differentiation, it's by the seat of your pants if you have not started with good planning. So the starting point for defensible differentiation is planning. You've got to have a plan. You've got to know what you want students to know and to be able to do. That's how you begin. So my question for you who are with us this morning, started to say tonight, project, if you will, the percentage of students who require instruction substantially different from the typical students to allow them to work within their zone of proximal development for mathematics. Any ideas? Is it 5%, 10%, 15, 20, or maybe more? I'm going to share just a little bit of research and it's all from the US. So you can think of it as US research, and if it fits, great. And you may have other research that you could put in its place. Most mathematics classrooms contain wide-ranging achievement levels. And this is research, trying to think of what the year is on that one, but it's recent. And it's done by a series of researchers in the US who are doing quite a bit that's worth paying attention to. Here's another study. It's the range of math levels in a fifth grade classroom. And these data have been pulled from large databases. Some of the same researchers here, Rambo, Hernandez, Makel, Peters, and Plucker. I'm going to take a closer look at this table. So it's looking at level of learning of fifth grade math classes. So you can see 23.9% of the students are at grade level. My goodness, that's a quarter of our students. Below grade level, if you put together the third and fourth grade, is 65% of the students. That leaves a very small percentage that's above grade level. Seventh grade, 4.4%, eighth grade, 3.1%. I think I skipped sixth grade, 1.2%, and high school, 1.8%. So we know right away that at a minimum, you need those who are scoring at sixth grade through high school, must have differentiation if they are to learn anything in that mathematics class. I find this to be pretty shocking, actually. And yet it's a 2020 study, and the researchers are certainly ones that we know are doing admirable research. So teachers must differentiate to enable all students to make continuous progress in reading, mathematics, or any subject. In the United States, so much emphasis is now placed on reading and mathematics, certainly through the elementary years, that's why they're singled out here. So differentiation for this wide range of learning needs is not possible without grouping. The research tells us that there could be multiple levels of reading in a heterogeneously grouped class. In fact, some of the same researchers are involved in this 2016 study that says a fourth or fifth grade classroom may have up to 11 reading levels. It is impossible for a teacher to differentiate for that many reading levels, and consequently cluster grouping or grouping in some way for instructional purposes becomes very important. So think, if you would, what is the range of reading levels in your classroom or classrooms in your elementary or middle school? Because if the range includes those who are above grade level, that's what I'm talking with you about tonight, this morning. So grouping for instructional purposes is important, but it's actually vital. It's a must-do. And I find that it is many times more acceptable to talk about grouping by readiness rather than grouping by ability. Don't know why that's true, but it seems to be just that. All of you know that what this next statement is, and that's no matter how you group children, if you have an honors class in another section, if you don't do something different with the content, it does not matter at all how you group children. So that's why I'm talking with you about doing something different, differentiating. So the steps in defensible differentiation, as I look at it, are 4. It always starts with planning. That's the firm start. But secondly, then we've got to take a picture of who knows what, who's interested in what, and that's where we pre-assess. Followed by tiering instruction. Everyone's studying the same topic, concept, but doing it at different levels, tied back to the pre-assessment. And then finally, reflection. We want to always reflect on learning that we've done, thinking of questions that we want to follow up on. If we've created products, how could we do it better the next time? If we don't reflect on learning, we don't make much progress. So we've got 4 steps. I don't know if in Australia you talk about an athletic sweat. We kind of do that. Have you broken a sweat yet? Well, I'm looking at it with an academic focus. What creates an academic sweat? What makes the challenge so that the students need to work, think, stretch their brain in order to accomplish whatever's being done academically. This next statement is kind of a duh statement. It is difficult to develop study skills if you don't need to study to earn high grades. I regret to say that there are young people that I know well who breeze through school because they have never been required to do anything that was challenging for them. Same work might have been challenging for others, but the teachers have not differentiated for the academically, especially capable students. So we must help young people develop study skills. We must help them think at high levels so that they are increasing their abilities to do challenging work throughout their lifetime. It is a prerequisite to work at challenging levels to develop resilience. And oh my, how important is resilience to doing well in life? We must have students developing and learning to be good thinkers, to accept challenge, to work hard, to reach goals, perhaps goals they didn't think they could reach. So you can differentiate content, process, product, and assessment. And let's look at how we do that. So with content, you of course have basic content as well as complex content. Gifted kids need complex content. Pre-assessment will almost always yield the information that they've got the basic concept, and if they don't have it yet, they can acquire basic content quickly. So how do we make content more complex? We add issues and problems, spending most of the time dealing with issues and problems related to the content or the concept. And every content has issues and problems. Process is what we do with our thinking. Content's the what you study. Process is the what you do at the thinking level. I understand you can't read this, but the top skills for 2025, and my goodness, we're there, almost beyond this. But if you look at the top 5 skills, and this is from the World Economic Forum, they look just like skills that we in gifted ed have focused on for a long, long time. Analytical skills and innovation. Well, there's nothing new about that, is there? Active learning and learning strategies. Complex problem solving. Critical thinking and analysis. Creativity, originality, and innovation. So I think it's the source for these skills that our students must be acquiring that's really important for our conversation. And it's from the Future of Jobs report with the World Economic Forum. And so you can get online and read more about those. But they do not look foreign to us. They look very familiar, and that is the work that we must have our students engaged in, doing all of that high-level thinking. Of course, it's a long time ago since the revised Bloom's taxonomy came out, and I don't even know the source to which to credit this way of looking at it, but I like it. And on the next slide, I've taken the words and put what they had as the bold headings with each. And I'll always start at the top because create is so different from what many people think it is. It isn't illustrating a cute book. It is not doing something that is artistic. It's producing original work. It's looking at something from a new perspective. And so many people miss the boat, maybe not in Australia, but many people in the United States in classrooms think of something less than what create really is as a learning experience. Evaluate, justify a stand or a decision, thinking, analyze, draw connections among ideas, apply, use information in new situations, understand, explain ideas or concepts, and remember, recall facts and basic concepts. When you pre-assess, you know what students need to be starting with the bottom 3 levels and which students need to be starting with the create, evaluate, analyze learning experiences. We as teachers make those choices, and as we differentiate for high ability learners, we're upping the process that they're engaged in. So let's think for a moment about some examples. And I'm not going to spend much time here. Let's look at the second one. Create a poster highlighting the process in photosynthesis. Well, create may confuse some for a moment, but there's really nothing creative about what they're doing. They are looking at the process and describing it. In the first one, write a graphic novel or children's books to detail the steps in passing a bill. That's pretty easy stuff. That's low level in spite of the fact that the first verb might throw you off for a moment. But I bet for you it's only for a moment. So we've had content, the what you teach, the process, what you want students to do intellectually, and the product is how you want them to show it. A real motivator for students is the product. And when they have a choice of product, it's especially motivating. Can we always give choice? Absolutely not. Sometimes we're teaching how to write a good essay, and everyone writes an essay. But sometimes we're having students learn about, well, you can pick any topic, and they could demonstrate it with a variety of products. And if you give them choice, they are far more motivated to do a really good job on completing that learning experience. This is a list of products. I'm sure it's not an exhaustive list, and we add to it any time we get good suggestions. But the key for what I'm sharing right now is there are a whole lot of products. And if I'm working with a group of teachers, I ask them to look at this list and check the products that they will have students complete this year. And then I ask them to look at it and star those products they think their students would most like to create. And usually it is not a one-to-one correlation. But it does encourage us as teachers to think about, okay, how could I provide the opportunity for them to choose one or two of the projects this month that they'd really like to have the opportunity to work on. So there are a lot of reasons to use products. They're motivating, they're engaging, they're real world connections, and I like that about them. They require us to think at high levels and to solve problems when we do a really good job with products. It's a good way for me as a teacher to match a learning experience to the student's preferred way of learning. Lots of creativity can be shown and self-expression. And when a product is done well, it gives you a great deal of pride in your work. And because we use products throughout our lifetime, they help us develop lifelong learners. So Dr. Tracy Inman and I have a book that's on products. And in that, we have the DAP tool, and DAP stands for Developing Assessing Product Tool. It is intended to replace rubrics. And think for a moment, if you don't have to write a rubric for every product you give children a choice of selecting, you've saved oodles of time. And we have developed lots of DAP tools, not that we thought we were the experts in all products, but we went to experts in all products in order to develop those DAP tools. And please know I could spend a day with you on products. And so I'm doing the zip through introducing DAP tool to you. So the purpose of the DAP tools is to provide the rubric that you can use again and again. And what teachers need to do is develop the assignment and then give students the DAP tool for that product, or give them DAP tools to choose among the products. Occasionally, and you all have gifted kids, you've assigned a choice of doing it with PowerPoint or a illustrated text. But the student says, well, I'd rather complete it with doing, and gives you the name of a different product. And because the DAP tools are developed and you don't have to go back and spend the evening preparing another rubric, you can say, oh, well, that would be fine. You may do that, and give them the DAP tool that's ready. There's several things about the DAP tool that I want to highlight for you. One is that the rating scale has a level of the professional. So let's look. You could be at the proficient level, you could be at an advanced level, and that's usually where rubrics end. We have a professional level because professionals complete products. Almost no students in elementary or secondary levels get a 6 because they are not professionals. My graduate students, when I ask them to write an essay about something we're studying, don't usually get a 6 either, because a 6 would mean that essay is ready to submit to a journal or to a magazine. So professional is really important to me in this. This is what a DAP tool looks like. And if you look down the left-hand side, there are 4 components that all DAP tools have. The first is content, because that's why we assign a product. Second is presentation, and that's the only one of the four components that's different, because if you're looking at what it takes to be a good presentation for a poster, it's very different if it's a graph, or if it is a journal, or if it is, and you fill in the blank with what the product is. The third component is creativity, and it's creativity with the content, but with the presentation too. So often we want creativity, but it is not listed as an expectation. It is with the DAP tool. And the fourth component is reflection. Completing an assignment always is better if you reflect on what you've learned, what questions it suggests for the future. So we have four components for all DAP tools. We have 3 tiers for all DAP tools, and if you'll look in the title, Poster Tier 1, we also have Tier 2 and Tier 3. Then you've got the performance scale to the right, and I've already suggested that the 6 is for a professional product. So we've got 3 levels. We've got consistency of components. We have a higher level than most rubrics would have with the professional level. And lest I spend too much time on this, I want to illustrate for you how content would differ for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1, we decided we would ask questions because that might facilitate students understanding what that meant. Is the content correct? Has the content been thought about in a way that goes beyond a surface understanding? Is the content put together in such a way that people understand it? But if you move to Tier 2, content is accurate and complete. Content has depth and complexity of thought. Content is organized. And if we move to Tier 3, content is accurate and thorough in detail. Product shows complex understanding and manipulation of the content. Product shows deep probing of content, and organization is best suited to the product. It's just as an example to show how the tiers differ, and that's just at the content level. And remember, there are 4 components: content, presentation, creativity, and reflection. So if you have a new project for your class, what is the project? How do you provide options to motivate all students to engage in completing that project? And choice might be really important to that. And what are stumbling blocks to providing options in the products they choose to complete? And one stumbling block may be having rubrics ready. And I'm suggesting to you that maybe the DAP tool is something that you might want to try to eliminate the challenge of having lots of rubrics ready for you. So we've looked at content, process, and product. And let me suggest children cannot learn what they already know, which makes it absolutely essential that we differentiate for our high ability kids. I see bookends for doing any kind of differentiation: pre-assessment and reflection. And what do bookends do? They hold things together. So remember, we start with planning, And based on what we've planned, we pre-assess who already knows it and can do it. Next, we tier instructional opportunities for our students. And then finally, we reflect. So I think that pre-assessment and reflection are those bookends that hold a really good learning opportunity together for our students. So pre-assessment is the first bookend to defensible differentiation. Pre-assessment lets you know who knows what in order to plan to address their needs or hit the target. If you don't pre-assess, as I think I said earlier, you're making decisions by the seat of your pants. And that's really not good enough if we want students to make continuous progress. It's also important to know their interests through pre-assessment. A reluctant learner, if you can tap in on his or her interest, becomes engaged in learning. And of course, we want instruction to fit the learner. And our only hope of that is to know something about what the learner knows and can do and what they like to do. So why do we pre-assess? Well, that's the only way we can ensure that we're moving toward continuous progress. It's the only way that we can defend differentiating, and it saves time. And I would have to tell you that people don't believe it saves time until they do it. And when they do it and find that quite a few kids in the class already know it, so we need to move on beyond that as we tier instruction. So you find out who knows what. It allows you to group by instructional levels, and it lets you group by interest on a project or some other assignment. Some pre-assessments can be written as a topic, and I actually don't have an example of this, but let me try and explain one to you. Social studies teacher might want the students to be studying, or could be a science teacher, the pandemic. We've all been so affected by that. You have and we have. So you develop a project that relates to the pandemic, but you give students different options of how they, maybe what they gather for their content, and also how they want to present it. And so you can ask on that pre-assessment, do you prefer to work alone or with a group? And do you want to do it and present it like a radio show? Would you like to do it with an essay with illustrations? Would you like to have your final product be the result of interviewing people about the pandemic to come up with your content? And then how do you want to present it? So a pre-assessment can be done in so many different ways. I was working with a group at a museum at one of our nearby cities, and we were doing programming there, and the teachers thought that a pre-assessment had to look like multiple choice test or some other way that you might assess at the end of the unit. Well, it could, but it doesn't have to look like that. A favorite pre-assessment for me, I don't know if this is as familiar with you as it's been very popular here for a long time, to have a TWL chart. What do you know, a KWL chart, what do you know about it? What do you want to know about it? And then come up later and what did you learn about it? Well, we've tweaked that and ask with a T, what do you think about it? So that you don't have to know it, but you think that's what it is. What do you want to know about it? It's the second column. And the H for the third column is, how do you want to learn about it? Can you do every suggestion that students have? Absolutely not. But if you can pick up suggestions, you can know what they know about it. You can know by their questions what they want to know, what their interests are. And if you want to snag a reluctant learner, if you look at how he or she says how they would like to learn about it, it could be a real win for you as a teacher. So you can ask for pre-assessment. I'll give you 3 minutes to write about what do you know about rockets. I've just been on a Zoom meeting with our teachers prior to Super Saturday, and one of them's teaching about rockets, so we talked about that. So give them 3 minutes to write about it. It doesn't take you a long time. You can sort those, knows a lot, doesn't know anything, or put some in the middle pile. The key is not to come up with something that takes you oodles of time to grade, but to find out what students really know about the topic of your next unit. You can also group by instructional levels based on the pre-assessment. You can group by interest on a project. Lots of possibilities, but you've got to have the pre-assessment data to have the information to do that. Reflection. Reflection is often skipped over for lack of time. Don't do it. It is so important to look at this other bookend for defensible differentiation. It's all about learning. That's why we differentiate, because we want our high ability students to be learning just like all of our other students are, but they need to have an elevated approach to content and to process in order to really be learning. And so we need to conclude all of our learning with reflection. What are the questions we have in moving forward? The simplest reflection might be, as you ask students, I used to think, but now I've learned. That's pretty elementary, but it gets students thinking about learning. As I work with parents, I always ask them to not ask their children, what did you do in school today? But what did you learn in school today? That's got to be our focus. And not complicated reflection might be, what are things I've learned today or on this unit? 2, things I found interesting. What caught my attention? And 1, questions I still have. Doesn't have to be that, but you get the gist of what it takes to have students thinking about their learning. A more detailed list of questions for reflection by McTighe and O'Connor, who are well known in the States, not in Gifted, however. What aspect of your work was more effective? What aspect of your work was least effective? What specific action or actions will improve your performance? What will you do differently the next time? And think of these questions specifically with a product. Say you're doing a PowerPoint And if you do the PowerPoint and you get the points you want and never ask, how could I improve this the next time? The next PowerPoint will be pretty much like the last one, because you must be asking questions if you're going to improve the product. Athletics do a lot with reflection. That's what the playback is. That's why everything's recorded and the coach goes over that. In classrooms, reflection is also our playback to learning as we look at what did we learn in the process of doing this, what questions does it bring up, and how do I improve the product? So why do we reflect? Well, it enhances our awareness of learning. It increases our learning capacity, and it's a lifelong skill. If you're in the kitchen and you're making something, if it works really well, you want to remember exactly what you did when you followed that recipe. If it did not work to meet every expectation that you had before you started to fix that recipe, what could you do to improve it? Did you bake those cookies too long? Did you? And you fill in the blank. I love this. It's a little bit longer than quotes I usually share, but this is a really old quote, almost 100 years old. And John Dewey wasn't in gifted ed, but he was a well-known educator. But I like the focus of this statement. And understanding, comprehension, and the pictures are over the next word, that the various parts of the information acquired are grasped in their relation to one another, a result that is attained only when acquisition is accompanied by constant reflection upon the meaning of what is studied. We've got to think about it. I think one of the challenges that even gifted students have is if they don't understand that learning is cumulative, they memorize it for an assessment and then let it zip away from them. Where if you're reflecting on what you're learning and know that this learning builds into what you learn next and what you learn after that, and you're reflecting on it, it is absolutely what makes you an outstanding learner. If you don't reflect on what you've done, you're likely to continue doing the same thing the same way. You certainly don't improve the quality of your work. So we expect that a goal we set doesn't go straight across like the top line does. That's just not how life is. If we're challenging our students, it's going to be a squiggly line as we have below. If it is a slam dunk easy assignment, it may well be that straight line. But if it's challenging, it will have lots of bumps, whirls, and swirls within it. So let's talk about tiering our learning experiences. We have the ingredients for those. It's all about content, process, product, and assessment. And we've talked about how important it is with the bookends, once we've planned, to pre-assess and then to reflect as we conclude. So these are the ingredients for our tiered experiences. And I'm going to share a few examples. I don't expect you to see the details. This is a planning form. And in this planning form, and you could use other process verbs, but I kind of like to use the revised Bloom. So those from create, evaluate, analyze, apply, understand, and remember. Then in the middle, you see the content or the concept, and it remains the same going down. Products vary, and if you can give a choice of product, it's even better. So that's the planning form. And here is really, it's a study of the heart, good biology content. So at the create level, create an apparatus to measure heartbeats per minute. Well, our bright kids who are fairly young could do that. Compare and contrast two diseases of the heart, issues and problems. Draw a diagram and label parts of the heart, much lower level than that. And in a classroom in which differentiation does not characterize the classroom, everyone is probably doing that, drawing a diagramming and labeling the parts of the heart. Am I suggesting that's good practice? No, not at all. So here's another example, and this is looking at Newton's law of motion. And same verbs over here across the top, process, content, product. The content remains the same. So you're tiering it for students. And those who work best based on your pre-assessment at the application, understand, and remember levels will have activities here. But those who show you that they know more and are ready to work at a higher level will be doing learning experiences that fit up here. Once again, a planning chart. And so this is more what you would have, and I don't know if you want to do this at centers, you can do that and ask, you've got red charts and green charts or folders, and in those you've got the learning experiences that you want those to whom you assign the red charts, the red folders, to do 2 of the 3, and likewise for the other folders to do 2 of the 3. For all of them, we want to have products that are engaging. We don't want the more advanced students to do really exciting things and the other students to be doing worksheets. That's not at all the point. We need products that are engaging at all levels. So at a low level, define and illustrate Newton's laws of motions on trading cards. Well, that's pretty low level or beginning level, let me say it that way. But doing it on trading cards or another choice that you give the students could be pretty engaging. So when we tier instruction, everyone in the class studies the same concept or topic. We're not doing different topics for our students who are ready to learn at higher levels, but they're doing different learning experiences, learning experiences that match their level of readiness and or their interest in the concept or topic. But when we come back together to discuss, everyone studied the same topic or concept, and so we learn from each other in those discussions. And that's why tiering is so important. And we expect with tiering to have challenging learning experiences for all of the students. But they're not the same learning experiences. We expect to differentiate, which is kind of the topic for my session. And that's the key point with tiering. All students are studying the same concept or topic. They just are learning at a level that's matched to where they are and they're learning on that concept, topic, or standard. If differentiation does not become routine, it won't happen for advanced students. The teacher must expect to differentiate for students who need more complexity, as well as for those who need basic learning experiences. But you've got to expect to do it, or as I started out, you'll be disappointed when you do the pre-assessment and realize that it's extra work to have learning experiences for students who already know a lot of the material. And in order for them to make continuous progress, we've got to tier up. The books that I have here are ones that I thought tie in to my topic tonight. Differentiating Instruction, that's the 4th edition of the book Tracy and I wrote. That's a lot of what I've talked with you about. But differentiating instruction needs to be something that's tried and true. You've got to know that you need to take the content and make it more complex. You need to look at the process and know that you need to elevate the thinking that students are doing. You've got to look at the products and have a range of products with choice whenever you can. The book with the most red on it is the book that's about the DAP tool. It's developing how we use student products, how we assess it, and it has oodles of DAP tools in it. My daughter and I have the other 2 books that pretty much tie into this content too. The Teacher's Survival Guide, Gifted Education, is in the 2nd edition, and it's pretty basic information. It has quite a bit to do on differentiation, on pre-assessment, but it also is looking at the field of gifted education in general. And the other book is also one that Julie and I have done, and it's looking at how do we create centers, and it has lots of examples of the kinds of learning experiences that are tiered. In fact, I think the heart example probably comes out of that book. And that's who I am. And I think I'm not too far off from the time that we said we would start questions. It's kind of hard to figure out what will be exactly an hour and not run over it. So I came up pretty much on target with it. So Anna, what kind of questions do we have from our participants?
Well, can everyone just join me initially in thanking Julia for sharing with us today. I don't know about everyone else there, but I love the idea of an academic sweat. The idea of it not smelling, perhaps, is what I think is appealing as well. But I love that idea to ensure. I think sport is often something that we can that we look at within the way that we can the way that it is celebrated, and we move children forward in sport in a way that perhaps that doesn't happen in gifted education as much. And so I just love that idea of an academic sweat. I think I'll take that one with me. We do have a number of questions coming through.
Okay. How do I get this down?
There we
Or,
go. Looks like it's gone. Wonderful.
perfect.
So we do have a number of questions, which would be great if you can, I'll take you through some of those. So there are a number of, there are a few questions relating to the DAP tool. So in terms of ensuring that we, how do we connect that with our rubrics that are provided from our national curriculum? So we have rubrics that are provided in terms of what students are assessed upon and what shows that they're meeting the standards that are set by the Australian curriculum. Have you got any insight as to how you might use the DAP tool to complement that?
Yes, I do. DAP, the D is for developing, and so this is what you would give students as they were starting to develop a project, and it would tell them what your expectations are, but under the presentation component, it would tell your students what's that product supposed to be like. And so assuming that you're developing projects with products, I think it would simply be an addition to what you're doing in the classroom. It would be instruction for your students on products, because actually it's a real help to look at the presentation. And what's a really good poster look like? Well, that's instruction, and you may not be doing posters, but fill in any other product you're doing. The D is for students to have that as a guide, and then for them to self-assess, and that's the A part of it. I don't think it replaces anything in your national curriculum, but I think it could support what you're doing in teaching.
Excellent, thank you. I have another question here about grouping. This participant has read some research about it being truly beneficial for gifted students, which is what we're talking about obviously today. But just with the idea of perhaps some negative aspects of grouping and streaming our students, particularly for the other students in the class. So yeah, can you speak towards how we can group well and using the differentiation?
I think grouping is probably something we must always talk about in terms of readiness, because it is pretty easy to show readiness to learn whatever we're offering them to learn. Probably cluster grouping is less objectionable to some people, in which you don't have a homogeneous class, but you probably have a group of your gifted learners and a group of your average learners together, which narrows the need for the teacher to look across all potential achievement levels. But I think it's how we talk about it and why we do it. And that's so everyone can be learning. And if everyone can do it, they need to be doing it.
Yeah, thank you. Another question, which is still on topic with differentiation. Can you speak towards how universal design for learning and differentiation, how do those two relate to each other?
Well, I think they relate because the universal design is certainly doing lots of planning for what it is you'll be teaching. And then I think differentiation can not only can, it should fit into any kind of planning we do when we find out that we have some students that are ready to move at a different pace or at a different level than others.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's they're certainly complementary.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and can work very well. I think UDL is becoming more widely used in Australia. It's been, used for quite some time. And I think today, looking at some additional differentiation tools and approaches for our learners will be great to be able to consider how to blend those together in teaching practices. Another one about the tiered instruction. So within that tiered instruction, how do you then ensure that that instruction still prepares the students well for assessment against achievement standards? I suppose that relates a little bit back to connecting the tools with the curriculum. Yeah, so how do you use that tiered instruction? How do you make sure that actually is still ensuring that students are moving towards those achievement standards that are required from them to move through our education system?
Well, I don't know your standards,
Right.
but let me kind of assume that they're similar to our
Yeah,
standards.
agreed.
And it's a perfect fit. As you differentiate, no one's keeping any student held back who's ready to learn. And it does not mean that we don't ever do high-level thinking activities with all kids. But it does mean that the steady diet of what we're learning will only happen if there's a match between the student's current learning, current knowledge, current skill level, and the instruction. The intent is for everyone to be learning, and I would say that on one unit of study, you may find that student has very little information and needs to be tiering with the three more basic process skills, but on another unit, they know quite a bit about it and are ready to soar with the more challenging learning opportunities.
Yeah, which shows the way that it actually addresses the needs of all learners in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, including our gifted learners, which I think sometimes, which perhaps would be another question to consider, is how do you, that idea that gifted learners, or they already know the content, they'll be fine, they don't need any differentiation or extension. How do you help to change that thinking, or to, how do we encourage others to adjust their thinking on how we serve our gifted learners?
I think that the myths in gifted ed are so persistent that just over time we seem to worry about them because they exist. Well, the truth of the matter, I find that very often athletic examples are ones that people understand. And if you say, well, they're fine, well, your best athletes will be fine then without a coach. If you want to stay right where you are, then that's okay to say. But if we don't have our gifted students learning on an ongoing basis, they will think everything's easy. They won't acquire work habits. They won't be resilient. They won't be what makes an outstanding adult. So we really are hurting gifted students when we don't provide that. And I'll kind of relate that back to the idea that gifted students' needs are created by their strengths. And if you don't see a strength as creating the need, then you probably will think they're fine, but they're not. They need to learn in school like everyone else.
And I think that's definitely, if they're not experiencing challenges in some of their earlier years of education or even their high school years of education, it can be quite a shock to them when they're challenged either at high school or that university level, where the challenge comes in at some point, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let me have a look. I have got another question here about differentiation in terms of that, system education, system-wide level. Why are we not all just differentiating right from the very beginning? Is this something that gets rolled out in the US in terms of their pre-teacher training? I know that's part of the pre-teacher training that's starting to that's occurring in Australia, but is that something that's happening in the US, and are you seeing more differentiation taking part over in US schools, or is it still a push?
It's still a push. I'm a teacher educator. That's what I do. And some people get it and some people don't. And it all depends on standards and the interest in meeting those standards. And I've been working on standards too, which is pretty tedious work, but it's so important for our field to have standards for teachers and for programming and a variety of things. You would have thought we would have mastered it, but I will not say that that is the case.
Yeah.
Some places we have better than others.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if Michelle can speak to that at some point too, in terms of what's occurring at the moment within Australia and what's coming out from universities in regard to the practices. Yeah, yeah. I did have another question I wanted to ask you in terms of you've provided some wonderful resources there, which is fantastic. I assume they're available from your, friendly bookstore, or online. I do know that you've got a website as well that provides a number of resources.
Well, the books are all published by Routledge, and so that's certainly a publisher that has materials out and available.
Yeah, 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 fantastic. And I might provide a link to the website for the Centre of Giftedness as well. Just as we come towards the end, I've just got a couple of other questions that have come in. What would you say is the biggest mistake that we could make when we're differentiating, and how can we avoid this?
I think the biggest mistake is not doing it. And that seems to be what is more prevalent. I think number two would be not planning well and just kind of embarking on what you're going to do so you don't have any way to pre-assess and take a picture of what your students already know about that content. They may know a lot, and that's a real time saver.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not sure if you'll have much time to speak toward this one, but in terms of, as the field of gifted education continues to evolve, are there, what do you see in terms of perhaps that the use of technology, AI is over our heads, But what do you see in terms of those spaces, perhaps? I suppose that fits quite well into the differentiation in terms of the products that students might be able to produce. But do you have anything to speak towards that and how that could be more, I guess, utilised well within this space?
I'm probably not the technology guru to answer that question. I work with one, and
Yes.
so we talk about it and think about it all the time. But I would also back off for a moment and say that we do a practicum in the summer for our graduate students in which we don't use technology, so that you're discussing and thinking and interacting together. And it's incredibly important. And it's so enjoyable by the students and by the teachers because that's not what they're ever doing anymore.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Michelle now. And as I do, if people could, provide a reaction. There's some other comments that have come through. Thank you very much for your presentation. So I'll now hand over to Michelle.
And thank you for facilitating questions.
You are welcome.
Wonderful. Thanks, Anna. And thank you, Julia. That was a sensational presentation and lots of food for thought for our teachers and other audience members. So please join me in thanking Professor Julia Link-Roberts.
And thank you for the opportunity. I've enjoyed being with you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'll now just talk through the remaining 3 webinars in our symposium series that are coming up in the next couple of months. And you'll start to hopefully get a really good idea of what's coming up if you haven't already. So our 3rd webinar will be next Thursday. And remember that these are Australian Eastern Standard Times. I know that we've had some daylight saving changes interstate, and I won't comment on Queensland's stance on daylight saving. So on the 23rd of October at 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m, we have Dr. Eleanor Van Gerven. Alone you go faster, together you can accomplish more, the search for golden moments when improving children's wellbeing. And we really look forward to seeing you all then. Just before you do go, a quick plug for a research project that I'm currently working on, which is an American Psychological Foundation funded grant project where we're looking for gifted teens to participate in our anonymous survey. It's an online survey using AI tools to see how they're using them creatively outside school. So if you know a teen between the ages of 12 and 19 who would like to complete our survey and they're gifted and they live in Australia, please encourage them to do so. And I'll just leave that up on the screen for a moment if you'd like to take a shot of the QR code or head to that link. So thank you once again for joining us today, and we hope to see you next week at the next symposium webinar. Bye for now.